Hello, I thought I'd make a quick video and show you the tools that I use for my electrical work here instead of trying to just list them. First of all, actually I did not have these when we did the electrical project at my parents' house, and I had them got them later and have used them in my house quite a bit. They're Makita LXT series, and they're great tools. They're very, very tough, and I wish I had them when I did the big electrical project. The drills, the impact driver, they're all extremely useful, and they work extremely well. So there's also a Sawzall. You can get a kit that has a Sawzall, a couple drills, and a flashlight to it, and I also bought the circular saw for it. Really worthwhile tools. They run promotions on them, and you can get them on Amazon and stuff, 300 some for the whole kit with all of them and 2 batteries. I think it's worth getting a 3rd battery, but the batteries are a little on the pricey side. Tools I use, most of them are Klein. This is a channel lock brand for little side cutters. That's very handy to have. This is the Klein Tools Journeyman brand needle nose pliers. These are really tough if you're taking old boxes out of the wall. A regular needle nose will not do. If you're trying to get out an old box and you're trying to crush it so you can take it out without damaging the wall, you need a needle nose that can get in there that is really strong. And this is it. I had some others that they were a quality needle nose, but they just couldn't do it. They bent all up. I have a number of Klein screwdrivers. I like them quite a bit. I found them to be good screwdrivers. One thing that's helpful, and I don't know how much you want to bother with this, but I have screwdrivers for like the different size tips. Like this is a number 2. It's a square drive. So this is what you use on a grounding screw. I have a number 1 square drive, and this is what's commonly used as the square drive on the side of light switches for the terminal screws. I find these easier to work with. They have all these in a screwdriver that you can change, multi-tip one. You can use that too. There's a regular Klein pliers. If I was going to get this again, there's a version of this that only costs a couple dollars more, and it has a wire crimper, a connector crimper right built into it. I would definitely get that one for a few dollars more, because where's my crimpers? Right here. See, this is my crimpers, and it's a separate tool. And you use this for, I put crimpers in the grounding wires. You can use wire nuts too. Crimpers take up less space, and I just got used to working with them, and I like them. But anyway, if you're buying one, just buy the tool that it has your regular pliers and the crimper in it. Then you have everything all together. This is about the best wire strippers they make for Klein, and they're only about 16 bucks. If you're hard on them, you will wear them out. I think this is my second one, but they have them at Home Depot. If you're doing a lot of Romex, you're going to probably pull all Romex. A jacket stripper like this can be nice if you don't want to have to cut the jacket. With this, you just put this around the outside jacket of the Romex. You snip down, and just one firm snip, and then you can pull the jacket right off. This cuts it all the way around, and without really having any chance of cutting the inside wires because of the spacing here. So it's a handy tool to have. It's maybe a $15 thing. There are this does 12-2 and 14-2. You'll probably also run some 12-3 or 14-3 if you have any multiple switch type situations. This won't cut the jacket for that. They do make tools for those, but I just cut them with my knife. So utility knife, Linux Gold here at Home Depot. This has been my favorite utility knife. It does take a special blade from Linux They're a little expensive, but the blades are really sharp, and this thing's been dropped off the roof and kicked around, and it's not had a mangled tip. It's not, the mechanism hasn't stopped working, and it's not broken in half, and so it's lasted about, I mean, it's been around for about 4 years now, and it's a great tool. These Klein tools, plumber's pliers. These are, again, a very reasonably priced tool. I think these are under $20, and nothing real specific that I use these for with electrical. I guess I probably use these if I'm taking knockouts out of metal boxes. Another tool that is great if you're having to crush old boxes and pull them out of the wall, so that especially, you know, you're going in, if you have an old box in the wall with knob and tube in it, and you're going to try and fish that without damaging the wall, the first thing to do is to get that old metal box out of there without wrecking the wall. Well, that ends up being a combination of the needle nose, you know, and some of this, and a lot of finesse to get that thing out of there without damaging your wall. Basically, you're crushing that box in on itself and kind of pulling it out in a couple pieces. So again, that's a very useful tool. I have some other various, like I said, I have all the separate screwdrivers. I also have a multi-tip one. There's one multi-tip that's like an 8-in-1. I think that's this actually. Yeah, this is, oh no, it's another, there's a different one. It's an 8-in-1. This is a 4-in-1. So whatever you do for the screwdrivers, just get ones with good tips that don't strip out right away, because you don't want to be laying on your you know, back in a weird position with a screwdriver that barely bites in. And that's one thing I don't like about these very well, is that you know, you're sitting there somewhere, you're in a bad position, and actually those don't tend to pull out as much as it tends to pull out of the body here. So that's why those are not my favorite. You're probably not going to do any conduit. If you do, you need a conduit reaming tool. I'm going to skip the conduit stuff really, because I'm thinking you're going to be using all Romex. You know, which is just the Romex, the standard, you know, in the jacket cable, which is like that. I have a little bit of around. I have a lot of conduit. Anyway, all right, here, let me show you this, because this is really handy. This is worthwhile to set up. It's just a little bin like this. You know, then you keep it forever after your project, and every time you need to go back for a little something, it's right there. $10, $15 organizer from Menards, and I have it filled with all my electrical stuff. Grounding screws, which I mainly use metal boxes, so you have to use one of these when you put it in the ground. If you're using plastic boxes, you won't use these. Let me warn you about one thing though. If you're taking out the old metal boxes and thinking of putting in new plastic boxes in their place, what I've found is the majority of the time the new plastic boxes are larger, and you're going to have to mess around with cutting the wall open larger. So that's one reason that I stayed with metal boxes in a lot of places. And then, like I said, you need to do one of these. You know, put it into you put it in the back of the box through into the hole. There's only one hole that'll fit in, and then you loop the wire around it and screw it on tight. So crimps, again, this is optional. You have to, if you have more than one ground in a box, if you're bringing in 2 wires and you have 2 or more grounds, they have to be physically connected with something. In older wiring, you see them just twisted together, and honestly, it's totally secure when they're done well. They're never going to fall apart. But in like 91, they started requiring that you actually physically put them together with some kind of connector. So the smallest, and I think the easiest way, nice looking way, is just you put one of these guys on it of the right size. They're 2 sizes. You slip it on there, you twist them together with your pliers, and then you put that crimp tool on this, and you just make a little crimp. You just crush it down. It makes a little divot in the center. They hold on tight. They're really nice and secure. They're hard to take off if you make a mistake. This is what they'll probably sell you if you talk about grounding stuff and you go to Home Depot or Menards. This has a little hole in the top of it. You can put you can strip a wire long and then put the other ground wires through here and then have the top of the ground wire come out of this to connect to your device, like your switch. I find them extremely bulky, and just having this big wire nut and just doing that whole concept of having the wire stick out like that, I don't like using them. I mean, unless you have a gigantic box and plenty of room, but the reality is, in the real world, is that a lot of times you're dealing with boxes that end up getting right up to about their space fill limit. Even when you buy deep boxes, a lot of times you have 3 switches in the boxes. You're using it as a junction for something else. And in the real world, you just don't have all this extra room most of the time, so you need to kind of do what works. Again, these are not expensive. They're readily available at Home Depot. You get the regular climb pliers with the crimper on it, and it's an easy way to just go ahead and use those. These are another type of crimp-on. I generally use these on when I'm putting in light fixtures with stranded wire. They're smaller gauge. I find these, I think they're a little bit easier to work with. You get that small fine wire, and you're trying to wrap that around, especially a 12 gauge. Regular wire nuts just don't want to hold that together very well. These work really well. So they work with the same crimping tool, and I don't know, they're not that expensive. They're probably 15-20 cents a piece. So in terms of wire nuts, can't believe I don't have any tans. Okay. Ideal brand tan wire nuts are probably the easiest to get all-purpose wire nut. They're really easy to handle. They're easy to put on. They're rated for up to like three 12 gauge wires, 4 14 gauge wires. I've used a lot of those. I also use that's not Scotchlock. I also use a Scotchlock brand, which is harder to find. You might get it at some of your local small hardware stores. They have a rubbery outer jacket, and they've been produced for decades. If you find any of these on any of your older wiring and you try and take it off, you'll understand why they're called Scotchlocks. They lock on, and you often have to cut them off. So they really bite. If you want to put together wires and have it really on there, these really do the job. They're expensive. They do have a nice deep skirt on them, and I think these gray ones are up closer to like 50 cents a piece if you buy them retail. But these will I think these gray ones you can do 5 12s. I believe they're rated for 5 number 12s, and I don't suggest doing that many together. It's really challenging to put together 5 number 12s. You have to really practice and be good at it to be able to get those to line up well, and get a good end on there. So the trick is, if you do have to do any of those, is to strip the wires, leave lots of extra wires, strip them way longer than you need, then hold them tight. So hold the jackets together all tight at the same spot, and then use your pliers on the far end, twist it together. You might have 8 inches of it twisted together or something. Have a nice long spot. Just make sure you keep those jackets lined up. Then just snip it down to where you need it. Don't try and twist something that's short or 3 inches or 4 inches. You're never going to do it. Give yourself a ton of space and then cut it back. That's what you have to do if you're doing those long ones. Screws, 632, 832, and 1032 in various lengths. Those are the screws that you'll use for electrical boxes, switches, and fixtures. Buy some extras and buy them in different lengths. You can cut them fairly easily with the pliers if you need to, but get some of those for your box. You'll lose them and you'll need some more. Scotch electric tape, 3M. This black roll, most of it's black. Super 33, that's what I was looking for. It's called Super 33 Plus. It's about the most expensive electrical tape you can buy. It's about $5 a roll, $5-6 a roll, something like that. Get this tape because you buy the cheap stuff, and what happens is you're using it to pull a wire through on your fish tape. You've got it all taped up really good, and then that cheap tape starts stretching out and it breaks, and then halfway through your pull, your fish leader, has just broken off, the wire's uncurled, and it's it's ripped right out of there. So more for functional work in terms of like pulling than actually using it in electrical work is where this stuff gets used. But go through a couple rolls of that, but it's definitely worth getting. Some knockout plugs. They're a little expensive. These screw-in kind are 100 times easier than the kind that push in. Mainly a 1/2-inch size. Again, this isn't something you're going to probably need a lot if you're not doing metal boxes. If you choose to use plastic boxes, then you generally don't need these at all. If you're doing metal boxes, though, to stay the same size, if you make a mistake, you knock out the wrong hole, this is an easy fix. So it's nice to have a few of those. I only use these on temporary work. These are certified, though, for use on permanent electrical work. What these are, this is a wire nut. This can connect 4 wires together. They're called a WAGO, and you just push the wires into it, and you strip off the end to the right depth, just about as deep as this, just a little less, and then you just push them right in there. So you can use this to connect 4 wires simply by pushing them in there. They do grab pretty well, and the wires generally don't fall out of there. So a lot of people are really comfortable with them. I prefer for my own work to use anything that's permanent, to use wire nuts, and know I've twisted them together well. But I do use this on anything I know I'm going to be taking apart again real shortly. If I'm putting something together temporarily, or I know I'm going to be adding to a box again, I go ahead and use these. They're not very expensive. They're available everywhere. So I definitely would pick a few of those up, even if you're not going to use them as your primary wire nut. Definitely pick some of those up to have. They do have them in a couple different sizes. So. Much easier for things that you're going to be taking apart and putting back together. Those are the majority of things. I don't actually have my electrical meter here. I have a I can look up the brand for you if you want. You can ask me about it. I can't think of it right now, but I have a couple meters. Actually, I think one of them's over here. My meter is still looking for my meter. I do have a couple Klein insulated tools. They're really nice if you're working around anything, any live voltage. You still don't want to short anything out. They'll still, cause a short, but they give you a great deal of protection against electrocution if you're actually, using them properly. So I generally don't advise anyone to, do live work just because of the danger of it. I'll do, most of the stuff in my panel. I'll do most of the work, live myself, unless I have a, good reason to, shut everything down, and then I'll usually use my insulated tools there. I don't know how much of the stories and stuff you read, but one thing that got us started is my dad was trying to move a ground wire in his panel, and he shorted it out by touching it to one of the hot leads in the panel, and he was using one of these insulated tools, actually the Neil knows. He was actually using this one, and this actually probably saved his life because he would have been electrocuted with a regular using regular pliers. Actually, I think that's a burn mark right in there from where he hit it. So it was lucky that it was really lucky that he was using the insulated tool. So It's just one more good point there. It's just one more good reason to stay away from any live voltage in your panel if you're not 100% comfortable with working around it and knowing that you're not going to make mistakes. If you really have to work around the top of your panel, I don't think you're going to have to do that a lot. You can have them pull the power if you really need to do much work there. So I'm sorry this is taking so long. I had a bunch of things here I wanted to show you. This is my fiberglass fish tape, my ideal. It's taped up really well. The leader got broken off of this years and years ago. I've had this thing for like 15 years. I got it when I was pulling data cables for my internet provider. But anyway, I would get one of these. They're really handy for a fish tape. Also, stay organized if you can. Don't be like me. I keep a spool with a bunch of single strand wire. I pull a lot of single strand for my own stuff. I mean, like this is all stranded, just coming into my panels, and my box is up there. So I mean I do use some Romex where I need to, but I put conduit in and pull wires single strand if I can. It's a lot more flexible, and for me that putzes around and changes things. Well, alright, I guess I'm going to skip it for now. I can't find my clamp meter. I don't know quite where I put it. I have a clamp meter that it'll check the amperage on a line. It's kind of useful actually. This is what it looks like. This is like a $10 version from Harbor Freight. I have a nice one that's about $130. That's from Home Depot. They're nice. You can see actually how much amperage something is drawing in real time by putting it over a conductor. It's not really a necessary tool. It can be useful if you're diagnosing anything weird and trying to figure out what's going on, if there's still voltage left, if there's something going over one of the knob and tube still. It can be helpful. And my other meter is it's just a good quality $100 type meter from Home Depot. Let's see, there was another fish tape I was going to show you, but I'm not seeing it. It's basically it looks like a regular fish tape like this, and it has kind of feeds out, basically it's a flat leader that feeds out of it, and that's easier to get up some walls, especially if you have access to it from the ceiling. It can be really easy just to slide it up walls. So anyway, it's pretty inexpensive, and it can be a handy addition to have. I also have a fish tape from Harbor Freight that is much more rigid, and in some cases that is actually a pretty helpful tool to have. Let's see if there's anything else I forgot before this movie is a half hour long. Okay, my screwdrivers. These are the rest of my client's screwdrivers. If you're not doing conduit, you probably don't have to worry about it. These are for tightening lock nuts on conduit. Speed bore bits, I use these sometimes, and I also use these. They both work well. These are the only ones that fit in my extension, 18-inch extension bit. More screwdrivers, small torch if you won't be doing any splicing with heat wraps, shrink wraps on them. If you're putting in any can lights, these are a set of little tools that are really helpful for getting the shades on and such on there. I was looking for that thing. If you have to drill new holes in boxes, this is what you use. Get it off eBay. They're a lot cheaper. Greenlee, this is the flat fish tape I was telling you about. Not that I couldn't find a minute ago. See that? These work really well in some situations. I think my fish sticks and push sticks are all sitting over at my parents', but I have a fish stick. I have a set of extension fish sticks which you screw together and get like 18 feet out of them, and then I also have a set of push sticks which are much more rigid, and they primarily have use like if you're trying to get wires up over raised ceilings, acoustical ceilings and such, where you need a little more rigidity to the wand. So they don't get used a lot. I used them in just a couple places. One last thing right here, Hitachi, this little sucker. These are like $50 or something. These are really handy for putting together, and their batteries last forever. They're really handy for driving the screws in to your boxes and your cover plates and everything else like that. So I think I've covered just about all the tools that I've used on my electrical projects in general. Those are most of the little tips I can think of to tell you offhand. So I'm sorry this has gotten so long. Hopefully you've been able to bear with me and absorb some of this information. I wish I had known a lot of these things up front before I got into a big project like this. Now when I do go and do electrical projects, knowing these things makes them much easier to handle. So certainly good luck, wishing you good luck, and certainly feel free to ask me other questions if there are things that come up and stuff that I've missed here. So good luck.